Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Amazon Prime will be releasing the Rings of Power Season 2. And we know that they've made a significant investment in that series. In fact, it's part of the deal. They have to do a certain amount of seasons. It's part of what they signed up for. Now, interestingly, Amazon Prime has now purchased, at presumably reasonable expense, a studio in London. Studio Bray. And Deadline is calling this a landmark UK deal. So I think there's a little bit more to it than that. I think this comes under, well, a way to remove some of the expense of Rings of Power. This is, in fact, where they filmed some of Rings of Power Season 2. So let's take a look at this and I'll sort of explain why and how this is the case. So hit subscribe if you're new here. Do turn those bell notifications on. So anyway, Rings of Power. Arguably a monumental disappointment in numbers. We saw that it was declining week on, week out. And overall, not a hugely well-liked series by Tolkienites. Don't know if that's a word, but we'll use that word now. And Amazon Prime, they sort of shrugged it off as something which was, it was really good. They loved it. It was great. And yet we started to see with Season 2 maneuvers to bring the cost down. So they moved from New Zealand to the UK. The UK has a very, very lucrative 24.5% tax break. In fact, to 24.5% of the total production costs just get given back to them. So it's not even a tax break. They just get a reimbursement. It's quite odd. It's very frustrating being a taxpayer in the UK, actually. So that was a pretty major move, trying to bring the cost down, especially considering that Amazon Prime would have built a lot of the sets out there, in New Zealand. Quite a lot of things actually would have been built and established, and then they moved it all to the UK. Obviously a great expense. It's a huge expense. What they didn't move to the UK, they would have had to have rebuilt. So they would have done that for a reason. And the reason would have been cost cutting. There is no way in hell it would have been any other than that. Cost cutting is the reason. And now we're seeing this purchase of this studio. Interesting. There's a few things here. Disney, for instance, if we're going to liken it to any other major movie studio. Disney owns other brands, don't they? Like ILM, for instance. And some other major things here and there. They own quite a lot of effects houses and various production companies. And remember, each and every single production that a Disney movie does is under its own thing as well. But if they shop out certain elements of the business, that particular movie, so the effects, for instance, they shop it out to another effects company that they in fact own. It begins to be this sort of way to wash out some of the funds, to absorb some of the costing, especially from an accounting perspective. I think Amazon Prime has done something similar with this purchase here. So let's take a look and I'll sort of explain it. Amazon Prime has taken another big leap into the UK film and TV industry by acquiring a 70-year-old studios where Lord of the Rings of Power is filmed. So financials were not disclosed on the deal for Bray Film Studios, with the first Amazon production rolling cameras there set to be the second season of the Russo brothers' Citadel series in September. So Amazon MGM Studios was initially listed as the Bray acquirer before being switched to Prime Video. You start to see where my train of thought's going now. Amazon, which already leases production facilities at the UK Shepperton Studios, will make TV series and feature films for streamer Prime Video from the site in Berkshire, around 26 miles away from central London. The acquisition includes approximately 53,600 square feet of soundstage space across 5 stages, 77,400 square feet of workshops, 39,400 square feet of offices, and 182,900 square feet of backlot, and 156,000 square feet of parking space. It's huge. So Prime Video made the second season of Rings of Power from Bray, which is widely considered the most expensive TV show of all time. And other projects they have filmed recently at the studio include Rocketman, Dracula, and The King's Man. And says this: with Bray as our creative home in the UK, we're committed to deepening our relationship with the UK creative community, which is rich with world-class storytellers and creative talent of all kinds, said Mike Hopkins, head of Prime Video and Amazon MGM Studios. The acquisition of a studio with such a storied heritage not only empowers us to produce more film and television in the UK, but also unveils a wealth of opportunities in the local community with respect to jobs and skills training at all levels and the production process. Now, I think the interesting thing about all of this is the fact that it's been moved under Amazon Prime. So it was, let me just scroll up here. So it was purchased by Amazon MGM Studios and then switched to Prime Video to put it under what I'm presuming anyway, Amazon Prime, like as in Amazon proper. And the reason why I think that's interesting is Amazon's main UK division has paid no corporation tax for a long time, actually. This was in 2023. They've not really paid a lot, if anything. Amazon UK services, in fact, received tax credit of £7.7 million for investment in infrastructure. Now, that's not, this is not me sort of critiquing it. It's more of an analysis of why they've done certain things. And so I think they've purchased Bray as a way to get it under themselves, or at least as a subsidiary of themselves. So they're the acquirer, but it'll still be its separate own business. And it's an accounting job. You tell me, what do you guys think? Disney do this all the time. But anyway, let's keep going with some of this stuff. So Bray is more than 70 years old, was formed by Hammer Film Productions in 1951, before being sold 20 years later. It was sold once again in 2014, restarted filming 5 years later, subsequently landing The Rings of Power. Further back, it hosted the likes of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, The Mummy, The Curse of Frankenstein, and Terence Fisher's Dracula. So Bray chair Frank Burke said the studio has had, quote, an important place in the history of British filmmaking for the past 70 years, quote, during our period of ownership, I, together with my family and team, have witnessed the rebirth of this iconic facility, and we're extremely proud of the part we play in bringing it to renewed prominence. We're now genuinely excited to be handing the studios over to Amazon, who we believe share our commitment to quality and excellence and are perfectly suited to preserving the character of the studio whilst enhancing the first-class creative production space for generations of filmmakers to come. Interesting. So Bray is only the second UK site to be owned by a US studio alongside Warner Brothers Discovery Leavesden. The move comes more than 2 years after Amazon signed a multi-million-pound deal with Pinewood's Shepperton Studios to lease facilities there for the next decade, before placing it next door to Netflix, which also has studio space on the site. Disney also leases space in Shinfield Studios. They do this because of tax breaks. Bastards. Very annoyingly. So notably, the news comes 6 months after Amazon used a written submission to Parliamentary Committee to warn the British government not to take for granted the country's status as a production hub that can rival Hollywood. The streaming giant had said that US studios could shift shoots at short notice, with the UK to become a less competitive, basically saying, hey, don't mess with us, we're just going to leave you, which is essentially what they're saying. A bun fight for UK studio space has broken out of late, taking advantage of the local tax credit and wealth of talent. So there you go. I think this is interesting. Very interesting. I think this is Amazon trying to remove some of the burden of cost of Rings of Power. You tell me. I think it's pretty clear, but you tell me if you've got a different assessment of the situation. Hit subscribe if you're new here. Leave your thoughts down below. If you like what I do, please do support me further via my Patreon. It is the first link down below in the description box. Cheers guys, take care. Bye-bye now.